Projects Committee to order at noon on August 23rd. And Member Mahmood has offered to lead us in the pledge, so let's let her do that.
Thank you. Everyone, please rise, put your hand over your heart, and begin with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the
United States of America, and to the republic
for which
it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Diana. Could we have roll call now, please, Eric?
Certainly. Give me one quick second. Chair Lyons.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Corey Moss.
Here.
Thank
Here.
you. And Supervisor Barker is excused, has informed us not to be here today. Member Becky Shavlin.
Here.
Member Diana Mahmood.
Here.
Member Maria Morales. Not here yet. Member Scarlett Parata.
Here.
Member Susan Jakubowski.
Here.
Member Tim Habern.
Here.
Member Tim Sandoval.
Here.
Chair Lyons, we have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's now time for public comment. Have we received any public comments?
Chair Lyons, we did not receive any public comments.
Very good. So we'll move forward to the chair's remarks. And I'd really like to thank the committee for attending the closed session meeting last Friday, August 13th. It was something we had to do very quickly and very timely, and staff greatly appreciated the dedication to get the Fullerton grade separation construction completion restarted. Not only did staff really appreciate it, the members really appreciated it too. And a reminder to the committee, Eric Shen sent you a survey to gather committee's interest in visiting ACE job sites in the near future. And there was a choice of dates and times. So in order so that this can be coordinated, please respond to the survey by August 31st of this year, so the necessary arrangements can be made. If you have any questions on this, feel free to reach out to either Eric or Charlotte with questions. Okay, it's now time for member comments, but I do see Paul Hubler has his hand up. So Paul, did you want to say something? No,
I must have inadvertently triggered that. Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. All right, are there any members who would like to comment?
Yes, this is Diana.
Oh, Diana, please go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to thank Eric for continuing to meet in advance of our meetings to answer questions. It's really helpful. It helps to make our meetings here that much more succinct. However, in discussing with Eric consultant selection, I believe that I would like to explore with staff and any other committee member what I will call a slight modification to our procurement procedure for professional services contracts that are subject to what I'll call the mini Brooks bill, which essentially covers professional services. And it's interesting because it's only a subset of professional services. It's just construction managers, engineers, architects, etc. But I would like to recommend a slight modification that I think would be in the best interest of the organization. And I'd like to work with staff and any other committee member that's interested in working with me.
So Member Mahmood, are you suggesting having a small subcommittee like we did earlier this year on this?
It's really up to the committee members. The modification that I'm proposing is very, very minor. And I don't know if others are interested in getting into the weeds, but essentially what I'm recommending is that currently when we have proposers such as construction management services or engineering, et cetera, we currently receive a sealed bid that we do not open until after we have gone through a short list, interviewed the shortlisted firms, and then decided which firms we wish to negotiate with. I'm suggesting that once we have selected the shortlisted firms, that at that point that we consider pricing, which generally is submitted under sealed bid because most respondents consider it trade secret protected, and under the government code, everything that they submit to us would be a public record unless they claim a trade secret associated with the information that they're providing. I think this is important, and actually I could make a legal argument that it's required under the Minnie Brooks Act, in that it is difficult for us. The Minnie Brooks Act, as I read it, requires that we obtain such professional services at a fair and reasonable compensation. And unless you know what other potential competitors are charging, you don't know whether or not the costs that have been proposed are in fact fair and reasonable. So it's a very modest modification where essentially, instead of cost not being considered until after the consultant is selected, it would be a consideration in selecting from among the shortlisted consultants.
So Executive Director Shen, I'm not really sure what to do with this. Would you like to comment?
And I'm going to ask our General Counsel, David DeBerry, to chime in. But I think based on my conversation, which I really appreciate, the conversation I have had with all committee members before the meeting, I think what Member Mahmood is suggesting, if the committee as a whole would like to make a motion to form a little working group, that potentially that could be one approach. Or we simply at a staff level, we can engage one-on-one conversation with Member Mahmood. So again, we'll take your advice on how you would like to proceed. David, would you like to chime in?
Sure. As I understand it, it's a relatively minor tweak. So the way the COG selects certain consultants, unlike construction contracts where the COG is required to let the contract to the lowest responsible bidder, the government code is essentially on the flip side of that. And when you're retaining architects, engineers, and construction management firms, you have to award it to the most competent firm. And then there's a provision that allows the COG to retain the firm on fair and reasonable prices, as was mentioned by Member Mahmood. So the way the COG does it is they open the bids, except they don't open the price proposals. They keep those sealed. They determine who is the most competent proposer. And then once they've made that determination, then they open that proposer's price proposal, and then they negotiate for fair and reasonable prices. So that's the methodology that the COG uses. I'm familiar with other agencies that do that. What I think I hear Member Mahmood suggesting is to take a look at qualifying the bidders and then opening the proposals, the price proposals, to see if the number one proposer is proposing a fair and reasonable price. And that's certainly one way you could determine fair and reasonable prices, i.e. what are the other bidders proposing? What are the other proposers proposing? Sometimes there's what I'll call, for lack of a better term, an engineer's estimate of what fair and reasonable prices should be, and that's what it's based on. So we can certainly take a look at that. I don't know if it needs a committee really to just take a look at that minor tweak, and then it would require a slight change to our procedure manual, because right now it doesn't allow us to consider price. But I think either methodology works, but certainly we can take a look at the slight modification.
Caroline,
Yes.
is it an option to have it agendized for the next meeting and to have a brief staff report and have the members make a decision based on that?
Well, I'm sure that is an option. Thank you for your suggestion. Becky Shevlin has her hand up also. So let's take the comments and then we can decide.
That was exactly what my comment was going to be. It seems like we've gone a little further out than just member comments, and maybe it would be helpful for all of us to just have just give direction to staff to bring an item back at our next agenda.
Okay, Member Hepburn, do you want to comment on this?
Yes, I'm in agreement with that because obviously it's with the Director Mahmood had stated it has to do with adopts the federal law, I guess is apparently what it does, the federal law for our state. So, I mean, if it's nothing that's a big issue, as our council said, then I would be good to bring it up for a study session, I think, and review it and see if it's applicable and it works for our system. It's just one more method to make sure that we're covering all our bases for our contracts and any of our vendors. So but it would be good to bring it up for an agendized item. I think we should all
Okay,
look at it.
it sounds like that's the consensus here. Can we go ahead and do that then, Eric?
Certainly will be glad to.
Okay, I don't see any other hands at this point. No, I do not. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll bring it up. We'll agendize it for next month. Thank you. Let's see. Are there other members that have comments?
Chair Lyons?
Yes.
I noticed a notification from member Jakubowski. Just in case your raise hand button doesn't work, do you mind if you simply truly raise your hand so we can acknowledge you? Or I can remind Chair Lyons if you were to make a statement.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that would be good. See, the problem with this is I can only see 5 faces at a time, and Tim knows this well. I can only see 5 faces at a time on the screen. So in order to see if anybody has their hand up, I have to page all the way through. So Susan, I'll look for you to be waving wildly.
And my apologies for jumping in. If I had seen hands, I certainly would not have. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Chair Lyons, this is
Yes.
Charlotte. Would it be helpful if when you're in discussion, I stop sharing the presentation so you can see the gallery view of all the participants?
Well, that would be helpful, but I don't know how long it takes to toggle back and forth.
Yeah, I think it might be pretty simple. Amy suggested it as well.
Oh, okay.
You can
Well,
give it a try.
Sure, certainly we
Next
can
time.
give it a try.
Okay.
I see no other member comments at this point.
Member Mahmood has her hand raised.
Oh, she does.
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
Also, Chair Lyons, if you simply move your cursor over to the left, we can minimize the member comments. I just did. I previously was like you. I only had 5 people visible, but by just minimizing the share screen portion and moving to the left, you can significantly expand the number of people that you can see, although they do get smaller.
I will try that as well. Okay, thank you. Seeing no other hands at this point, let's go ahead and ask Eric for the Director of Capital Projects monthly report.
Thank you, Chair Lyons. I will highlight a few items, including the Director's monthly report. Last Friday, after the committee's approval, the Executive Director forwarded an offer to the Director of Los Angeles County Parks and Recreation for the Diamond Bar Golf Course replacement land. We're currently waiting for the response from the county. We're also working with the City of Diamond Bar on the design and the funding arrangement for the Diamond Bar Boulevard at State Route 60 eastbound on-ramp improvements. The recommended funding source for the betterment agreement will be presented to the government boards for consideration in the very near future. Under contracts, we have provided a list of 2 contract modifications since the last committee meeting. I will be glad to respond to any questions that you may have on any specific item. Next, I'm going to ask my colleague Paul Hubler to provide a brief update on the fiscal year 2020, 2021, 2022 federal appropriations, and also the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Paul?
Thank you, Eric. If we could advance to the next slide. So this you've seen before, presented it to you before. Let me minimize here so I can actually see the whole thing. This is essentially just a listing of our federal earmark requests. And that's includes those that in the House have made it into the relevant legislation. So you see there, the city requested for the Laverne Gold Line Station pedestrian bridge, 4 million, which the COG is overseeing the design phase of right now. And Congresswoman Grace Napolitano put in a request, which is in the appropriations bill that was passed by the House. Similarly, Congresswoman Young Kim for the 5760 project put in a request for $18 million for that project in the surface transportation bill, which passed the House, was sent over to the Senate, but the language was essentially stripped out in order to accommodate the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which I'll talk about in the next slide. And then Senator Padilla has put in requests that are still pending for the Montebello and Turnbull Canyon Road grade separations, $10 million each, and then the 5760 project as well. I'm only focused here. These members have additional requests. There are members who are not listed here who have San Gabriel Valley requests, but these are the ones that are the responsibility of this committee. That's why I'm listing them here. So if we could go to the next slide. I also, as Eric mentioned, wanted to talk about the bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed the Senate and essentially is the 5-year, if you could take it back one, there you go, is essentially incorporates the 5-year surface transportation bill plus additional infrastructure, mainly relating to water, but broadband, et cetera. And what I'm focused in on here are the freight programs that could provide opportunities to secure funding for the ACE grade separations and or the other capital projects that are assigned to this committee. In particular, I wanted to call your attention to two new programs. That first one, the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program, that's a brand new program, not authorized in previous bills. It specifically targets rail highway grade separation or closures, track relocation, protective devices and signals, essentially many of the types of projects that we're engaged in along the Alameda Corridor East rail corridor. So that's a new program at $3 billion over 5 years. And then the other new program is the PNRS Mega Projects Discretionary Grant Program. That's similar to a program that was initiated about a decade ago, the projects of national and regional significance. The ACE project was so designated by Congress and received funding out of the PNRS program. This PNRS program is a little different because it includes not only your typical highway bridge and freight rail projects, grade separations, but also includes intercity rail. So that is different from the previous PNRS programs, which were pretty much restricted to essentially roadway projects. That is proposed to be funded at $5 billion over, so $1 billion a year over 5 years. And then the infra discretionary grant program, we're familiar with that. The SR 5760 project has been awarded out of that program. That program would be funded at $8 billion over the 5 years. Section 130 program, $1.2 billion. That's for funds that are distributed by formula to the states for the elimination of hazards. Mainly, these are at grade surface improvements. We've got Section 130 on our project in Pomona. One of the 5 crossings is being funded out of the Section 130 program by Caltrans, out of their state share of that. And then at the bottom of the screen, the freight formula program, apportioned to the states for highway, bridge, and freight projects. That program is proposed to be funded at $7.15 billion. That has been of significance in California. It's been essentially included in the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, the state gas tax funded program, and the CTC oversees the distribution of those federal programs to the most meritorious projects And with that, I think that concludes my brief report. Be happy to answer questions if any.
And thanks, Paul. And back to you, Chair Lyons. We'll be glad to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, this item is for receive and file.
Yeah, I'm wondering, how do we get our hands on that money, the new money?
Well, we would have most of this funding, most of it goes out by discretionary grant program. So once the bipartisan bill, as we know, has passed the Senate, it's been sent over to the House. They're debating a rule for taking up that bill this week. And if the bill is approved by the House and sent to the president for signature, the money would become available starting this next fiscal year in September. So DOT will have to stand up. In some cases, they already have guidelines for these discretionary grant programs, like the infra program. The new ones, the PNRS and the railroad crossing program, those will they'll have to develop guidelines. There's a comment process. There's a whole body of federal administrative guidance and law that pertains to the development of guidelines. So it'll take some time. And then we would have to submit applications for that funding. So.
Yeah, I mean, obviously new sources of funding are just what we need for a couple of those projects. I don't see any other hands up. And I don't see Susan waving. So I think we are good to go on then.
Item number 7. And Chair Lyons, item number 7 is a progress report on major projects under construction. And I'm going to ask our project managers, Renee Cornell, to update on the Durfee project. And also I will ask Charles Tan on the progress of Fairway Drive grade separation project.
Thank you.
Hello. So for Durfee, the project construction continues. Next slide. So in this photo, we are excavating the soil to do the grade separation. We are excavating it and hauling it out. So this is north of the bridge. And in the next month, we will hop onto the south side of the bridge and the street will start to take shape. Next slide. As we are working on stage 2 of the bridge, we are working on the foundations. That's the first order of work. In this one, we are drilling for the CADH piles, which the bridge rests on. That in the next slide, that 110-foot rebar cage will be in the ground. And as you can see, once we dig the hole, we place the rebar shaft inside the casing, and then we pour concrete. So that's what the bridge is being held by, it's pretty long. And then the next slide. Once we do pour the concrete and place the rebar, we start excavating and exposing it, and that allows us to work on the next phase of the bridge. Progress is continuing. Other than that, that's it for Durfee.
Thank you, Renee. Charles?
Yes, Eric, thank you. Next one, please. Yeah, good afternoon. This is what we've seen or we've showed you last month at our meeting. So you're looking north along Fairway, looking northward, and the contractor is doing all the grading work. Next slide, please. This is what you've seen as of this morning. So majority of the pavement is done and finalized. So contractor is like start putting in the socket joints, the expansion joints as we speak. Next one, please. And this is looking east along Business Parkway. The area on the right-hand side, that's part of the intersection that we are not going to open in the next phase. So that's why there's some other work that needs to be done. That's why we are not paving those yet. So, but it will come later. But majority of the, I call it the usable service for the September opening, it's all completed. Next one, please. This is kind of like an overall view. This little slot along the northbound curb lane, as we speak this morning, is already paved as well. So just waiting for the concrete to cure. So next week or the later part of this week, Edison folks are coming in to stand up the street lighting along these two stretch. So we are prepping it and still target to reopen it sometime in September. Next one, please. And this is what I stand at the intersection looking south. The grading crew, which is like another contractor's crew, they start grading the underpass. So you can kind of like see the bridge at the background. So there will be about 15,000 cubic yards of dirt that we need to move in next 2-3 months to shape the underpass. And retaining wall work will be done while we are doing the grading. So everything is moving along. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions if there's any. Just to recap, on the last 2 weeks, we pour 1,050 cubic yard spread over like 5 days of pour. So average about 200 cubic yard a day.
Are there any questions from any members? I don't see any hands up. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's go on to the Rio Hondo Watershed Load Reduction Strategy Project update.
Great, thank you, Chair Lyons. If I may go back to the progress report, just as a reminder, these 2 project sites are the ones that we would like to provide you with the in-person view. And as you see the progress being made, they're pretty significant from week to week. So I hope that you will have enough, you will find a time to join us out in the field. So with that, I'm going to provide an update on the Rio Hondo Watershed Load Reduction Strategy study. This report has been provided to you in writing, and therefore I'm going to provide you with a very high level verbal update and also make one additional clarification, which we somehow omitted from the written report. The Rio Hondo Watershed Program is a collaboration between the San Gabriel Valley Council of Government, Los Angeles County, and several neighboring cities to address the need for low flow diversion from the Rio Hondo watershed. 3 sites are included in this project, which they are Alhambra Wash, Eaton Wash, and the Rubio Wash, to address bacteria contamination, improve water quality, and also incorporate natural-based solutions in the and then provide opportunities for community enhancement. On December 14th of 2020, the committee approved a contract award to California Watershed Engineering Corporation, which short for CWE, for the final design effort. In the last few months, CWE staff has been proceeding on the design towards 65% completion. In the next few months, the project will also move into permitting, right-of-way acquisition, and also public outreach phases. The total remaining cost for completing the design, environmental, acquisition, and construction is estimated at $14.2 million for all 3 locations. At this moment, $7 million have been provided by the Los Angeles County Safe Clean Water Program. And I do apologize, this is one acronym that we forgot to spell out in our memo. So SCW stands for the county's Safe Clean Water Program. The SCW program will contribute around $7 million towards this program. The remaining funding needed to complete this entire project will be matched by all those cities who are part of this program. So with that, that concludes my brief summary on this item, and I will be glad to answer any questions you may have. This information is for receive and file. We will continue to bring back updates in the next few months.
Okay, I do not see any hands up. Are there any questions? No questions. So then thank you, Eric. Let's go on to the proposed funding guidelines.
Thank you, Chair. Alex Fong, our Senior Management Analyst, will provide a summary on the proposed funding guidelines. Alex? Is Alex on the phone? Chair Lyons, I don't see Alex on the phone. Could we come back to this item?
Yes.
Once we make sure that, oh, Alex is here.
Oh, there's
Alex
Alex.
is here.
All right.
Yeah, we
Sorry
just
about that.
promoted him. Sorry about that.
Hi there, no worries. Yeah, I was stuck on the attendee side, but thank you members of the committee for giving me the time to provide this presentation. It is my pleasure to present our proposed funding guidelines for the upcoming cycle of MSP funding, which is something that I know a lot of our cities are very excited for. And we are proposing to have the governing board approve these guidelines, and we're in the process of going through the relevant committees to receive feedback. So for the next 5 minutes, I know I'm going to share a lot of information, but a lot of the all of the information can be found within the agenda packet as well. Next slide, please. So our Measure M multi-year sub-regional funding, of course, comes from Measure M. Measure M, just as a quick recap, was passed 5 years ago as a half-cent sales tax for transportation improvements across LA County and within the San Gabriel Valley. It is expected to generate over $3 billion for transportation improvements in our sub-region over the next 4 decades. Next slide, please. As for MSP, the Measure M sub-regional program, in June of 2018, Metro adopted the Measure M guidelines to establish a process by which the sub-regional funds under Measure M will be programmed by the sub-region's respective governing entities. So for the San Gabriel Valley, that is the San Gabriel Valley COG. We are tasked with programming and administering the Measure M sub-regional program, or MSP funds. While sub-regions are granted the authority to program and allocate MSP funds, all of the MSP projects must be reviewed and approved by the Metro boards before the allocated funds can be distributed. Next slide, please. And we've programmed the first cycle of MSP funds, and that's fiscal year 2017 to 2021. And in 2018, after working with all of our committees and the governing board, we've allocated about $37.3 million in the first cycle of MSP funds to 20 active transportation, first last mile, goods movement, complete streets, highway, and bus system improvement projects. Now, the awarded projects have up to 3 years to expand the funds before they expire and return back to the pool for funding for the next cycle. Timeline extensions or reprogramming in Metro terms can be granted at the approvals of both our governing board as well as the Metro Board of Directors. Without reprogramming, the awarded funds can request a one-time 20-month extension of the funds before they expire and return to the regional pool. This same policy applies to the upcoming cycle of MSP funds as well. Recently, our governing board approved 11 reprogramming requests for, and that's 11 of the 20 projects from the first cycle of MSP funds, because a lot of them were delayed due to staff turnovers and the COVID pandemic. And all of them were approved. Next slide, please. And just really quickly covering the grounds of what can some of these funds be used for. Under the active transportation category, they can be used for capital improvements that improve access to transit, support the establishment of active transportation as integral elements of the county's transportation system, enhance safety, remove barriers to access or correct unsafe conditions in areas of heavy traffic, high transit use, and dense bicycle and pedestrian activities, promote clean transportation options to reduce pollutants and greenhouse gas emissions, and improve public health through traffic safety, reduce exposure to pollutants, and design infrastructure to encourage residents to use active transportation to integrate physical activities in their lives. That can be a whole bunch of things, and that's what I love about the active transportation category. The next slide talks about bus system improvements. So the bus system funds can be used for construction of or improvements to transit centers, bus layover areas, park and ride lots, transit stops, commuter rail stations, and transit maintenance facilities. The next slide talks about our first last mile improvements. So under this category, this can include funding for infrastructure for walking, rolling, and biking, facilities for making model connections, signage and wayfinding, and information and technology that eases travel. Next slide, please. So we were informed by Metro that plans to program the upcoming cycle of MSP funding, which ranges from fiscal year 22 to 25. We can submit these proposed eligible projects for funding to Metro as early as January of next year. We currently have the fiscal year 22 to 24 funding estimates, but the fiscal year 25 estimates will only be available starting in October. It's just around the corner, but then as of this moment, we only know the estimates for 22 to 24. Next slide, please. Thank you. And this slide shows our current funding, like how much money that we have to program. And you can see that under fiscal year 25, it's TBD because we would know in October. But just the estimates conservatively under active transportation for fiscal year 25, that's probably about $2.5 million. And that's a conservative estimate. Under bus system improvements for fiscal year 25, we can estimate that we have about 600,000 under fiscal year 25. And for first last mile improvements under fiscal year 25, we can safely estimate that we have at least $2 million for that year. So if you add all of that up, we have about $22 million in total to program for these three categories of projects. It's not a lot of money. And that's what we have to work with for fiscal year 22 to 25. Next slide, please. So yes, including the fiscal year 25 estimates, we have about 22 million to programs. Given the limited funding available, we intend to prioritize regional projects that really maximize the transportation benefits for our subregion. And eligible applicants, as always, include cities, the county, and JPAs. Proposals from JPAs must be sponsored by cities or the county. Next slide, please. And we propose to bundle the 22 million together across all three categories and fund multi-jurisdictional projects that can enhance active transportation, bus systems, and first last mile connections in key corridors in the San Gabriel Valley. And the first category, we propose to allocate up to 15 million to eligible corridor projects for their planning, design, and construction phases. For category 2, the remaining 7 million of the 22 millions, we propose to allocate that to eligible corridor projects for their planning and design phases only. And under category 2, each project can apply for up to $1 million. But please do keep in mind that one corridor project can include various active transportation, bus system, and first last mile improvements along the corridor, as long as the proposed improvements fit within the measure and project eligibility criteria that we just went over in previous slides. Next slide, please. And we propose that the COG serve as the default implementer for this cycle of MSP projects, given the feedback provided by cities under the initial round related to Metro reporting requirements and our cost experience in coordinating and managing multi-jurisdictional planning and capital projects. However, if a city or the county decides to serve as a lead implementer for any of those multi-jurisdictional projects, they may do so provided that they have the concurrence of the other participating jurisdictions. Next slide, please. And really quickly to cover the proposed screening criteria, these are the key category 1 project requirements. And they should demonstrate that they have 20% local funding matches. They should reach a minimum of 25% design completion. Reaching 65% designs will result in higher scores in their applications. Category 1 projects should be identifiable in at least one participating agency's 5-year CIP. But the jurisdiction is welcome to expand on that project scope in the MSP project proposal. Funds for category 1 projects cannot be used for right-of-way acquisitions. If you click next, it should show the category 2 project requirements. It's very simple for category 2. It's just a minimum of 10% design completion. Reaching 25% design completion would result in higher scores for those applications. Next slide, please. So all of the projects have to provide evidence of a community-based public participation process and community support. And that can be demonstrated through letters of support, documents of community or public meetings. And a copy of the proposed guidelines, the funding guidelines, can be found in the attachments. Next slide, please. When it comes to the scoring criteria for category 1 is out of 100. 50 points for project feasibility, 20 points for regional impact, and 30 points for demonstrated supports. For category 2 projects, if you click next, it's also out of 100 points, but 25 points for project feasibility, 25 points for regional impact, and 50 points for demonstrated supports. Our attachments in the agenda packets shows the proposed rubric for scoring each of these criteria. Next slide, please. This is our proposed project timelines, assuming that, well, right now we're in the process of gathering feedback from our committees for the proposed guidelines. Once those guidelines are approved by the governing board in September, immediately thereafter, we're going to open the call for projects. And we're going to, I believe, open the call for projects for close to a month. We're going to have an application workshop on October 4th to help cities to, if they have any questions about the applications, we're going to have a workshop for that. And the deadline to submit applications is October 18th. In accordance to the guidelines that we've adopted when it comes to MSP fundings, we will make our staff recommendations available for the projects that we recommend to award by November 1st. And throughout the entire month of November, we're going to approach the committees as well as providing a platform for the public to submit their public comments. After gathering all of the feedback, the final staff recommendations will be presented to the governing board for approval in January of next year. Right after the governing board's approval, we're going to submit all of that, like all of the relevant information to Metro. And Metro is scheduled to provide their final stamp of approval in May 2022. After that, we can begin releasing the funding to the awarded projects. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we are going through all of the relevant committees to review the proposed guidelines right now. We're going to combine all of the feedback and then present the finalized documents to the governing board for approval. But specifically for this committee, the Capital Projects and Construction Committee, we will also present the highway category funding allocations at upcoming meetings in the future for your review. Next slide, please. And as the committees are, as the committees are reviewing the draft guidelines, cities and agencies that are interested in applying for this pool of MSP funds can submit a statement of interest by completing an interest form to provide preliminary information on their proposed projects, like just some of the basic information. The collected information can really help us to gauge our city's interest in applying for this cycle of MSP funds. And I will share the interest form with Charlotte to be shared with members of the committee shortly after this presentation. The interest form is scheduled to close on September 6th. I do want to note that the interest form is not required for you to submit in order to submit an actual application, but the information from the interest form is very helpful to COG staff. And with that, thank you so much for your time, and I'm here to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Alex. Do any committee members have questions? No, I actually have two questions. Alex, I'm not familiar with rolling mode transportation. Does that mean wheelchair transportation, or what does that mean?
It's very similar to bike lanes.
Well, what exactly does rolling mode mean? Does it mean anything in a bike lane?
Yeah, that it can include skateboarding, scooters, what is it? The rolling shoes, I guess. And Eric can probably share more on that as well.
Okay.
Maybe hoverboard or even flying carpets.
flying carpet. Oh, we don't have any of those in Diamond Bar, but I wouldn't mind getting some to go over the 5760 confluence, which I had a second question then too, in all seriousness. So, could we incorporate the Diamond Bar Boulevard SR 60 East ramp into this also for the funding?
I will leave it to Eric.
Alex, and thank you, Chair Lyons. In fact, that is it will be our recommendation for inclusion of this betterment as part of being funded through the MSP highway category. We feel staff is working with the city staff on not only on the design element of it, but with just the merit, the justification of this improvement. We feel that fits. It is in line with the MSP highway category. So to come back to your question earlier, yes, that's what we plan to bring back to the committee for approval in a few months.
Oh, that's great. I mean, it certainly is, widely used by the greater community, even perhaps Mr. Hepburn at times. Do I see any other hands? I do not. Okay, thank you. And I'm assuming there's been no public comments on any of these. I did not ask about it, so. Okay.
Charlotte, could you confirm that there's no public comments so far?
None so far.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. All right, next we have approval of the Capital Projects Committee meeting minutes from July 26th. So there were a couple of corrections that were made, right? Did you guys make those corrections?
If you allow me, Chair Lyons, I'm going to just read out what the corrections that we're going to make. Under page 77, under roll call item number 2, we apologize that we listed your title incorrectly. So we will correct to Nancy Lyon, Chair, Diamond Bar, and we also apologize for not correctly indicate Corey Moss as Vice Chair. And those are the 2 corrections that we're going to make.
Okay, so could I get a motion to?
With corrections, Sandoval move to approve.
And
Second.
that's the corrected minutes is what we're approving here. Okay,
Second.
so motion by Sandoval and second by
Tim Hepburn.
Hepburn. Okay, Tim and Tim, could we take roll call, please?
Certainly. Chair Lyons,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moss,
Yes.
Member Shavlin,
Yes.
Member Mahmood,
Yes.
Member Morales, Member Peralta,
Yes.
Member Jakubowski,
Yes.
Member Hepburn,
Yes.
Member Sandoval.
Yes.
Chair Lyons, the meeting minutes is adopted unanimously.
Very good. That leads us to number 11, the approval of selection, award of contract, and issuance of task order 1 to AECom for construction management services for Fullerton Road grade separation. Eric, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Staff is recommending the committee's approval for awarding a contract to AECom in a not to exceed amount of $8,905,000. Let me read it correctly again. $8,905,053, and also delegate the authority to the executive director for completing the contract execution. On July 8th, 2021, we issued a request for proposal for a construction management services for the Fullerton Road grade separation project. On July 28th, a total of 6 proposals were received. A 5-member technical evaluation committee reviewed the written proposal and invited 2 proposers for interviews on August 10th. At the conclusion of the process, the technical evaluation committee ranked AECom as the best qualified proposer. On August 12th, we issue a notice of intent to negotiate with AECOM and notify all proposers. At the end of the protest period, we did not receive any correspondence or protest. The RFP was issued under the Small Business Enterprise Program currently in place. With the agency established 11% SBE goal on the project, AECOM is committed to meet or exceed the 11% SBE goal through the life of the contract. In addition to the recommended amount, an additional 10% contingency allowance, or $890,000 and $505 will be budgeted to address any unforeseen work or owner-initiated changes. That concludes my presentation and recommendation. I will be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, do we have some questions from our committee here? I see no hands. So there are no questions on this? All
Let's
right.
take a quick pause. And Charlie, is there any question, any comments from the public?
I don't see any, no.
Okay, and I do see
Member
Member Mahmood has her hand up, so she has a question.
Yes, not on this, but Eric, your audio just started to distort. And I didn't hear distortion from anyone else. So just a heads up. I don't know if
Thank you
there's
very
something you
much.
can do. You're welcome.
Is it better? Is it better at this moment?
Yes,
Yes,
yes, it
Sorry.
is.
Okay.
yes, it is better. Okay, so I see no hands. So then may I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second, Moss.
Okay, so made by Hepburn, seconded by Vice Chair. Take the roll, please.
Chair Lyons,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moss,
Yes.
Member Shovelin,
Yes.
Member Mahmood,
Yes.
Member Morales, not here. Member Parada,
Yes.
Member Jakubowski,
Yes.
Member Hepburn,
Yes.
Member Sandoval.
Yes.
Chair Lyons, the item is passed unanimously.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of our meeting. So with no further business in front of us, we will adjourn at 12:53 and next meeting September 27th. All right.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
all.